Receiving God's answers to your prayers. This video is a compilation of the introductory material written by Paramahansa Yogananda for early editions of his book, Whispers from Eternity. When Paramahansaji revised Whispers for the upcoming 8th edition, he wrote a largely new introduction. While the instructions in this video are specific to the invocations in Whispers from Eternity, the principles expressed reveal a science of prayer that is applicable to all who seek divine assistance in changing their lives through the power of prayer. God created man in His image. All who know how to receive Him can awaken the divinity that lies within them by expanding their mental powers. As God's children, we have the potential for dominion over everything in His universe, just as He does. The question arises, why are so many of our wishes not granted and so many of God's children suffer greatly? God, with His divine impartiality, could not make one child superior to another. He created all souls in His image. They also received God's greatest gifts, freedom of will and the ability to reason and act accordingly. Men have broken God's various laws at some point in history, resulting in lawful outcomes. All men have been given complete freedom to apply human reason incorrectly or correctly. Misuse of God-given reason leads to sin, which is the source of suffering, whereas proper use leads to virtue, the precursor to happiness. God, with His infinite nobility, would not punish us. Instead, we punish ourselves for our unreasonable actions and reward ourselves for our good behavior. The law of cause and effect is applicable to all lives. All todays in one's life are determined by the actions of all yesterdays, and all tomorrows are determined by how all todays are handled and lived. Man's despair and misery are caused by the misuse of reason, as well as the identification of the soul with the transitory body, or with environmental, hereditary, or world influences. Nonetheless, every human being, no matter how flawed they appear on the outside, has the potential to be a son of God. Even the greatest sinner is merely an unawakened son of God, a sleeping immortal who refuses to receive His light by clarifying his consciousness. In John 1:12 it is written, "But as many as received Him, He gave them power to become the sons of God, even those who believe on His name." The meaning of St. John's words is that sleeping sons of God who awaken by following the law of spiritual discipline receive or feel God through developed intuition, regaining their latent powers as sons of God. Ignorance causes man to imagine his smallness and limitations. Ignorance is the ultimate sin. It is good and right to believe that one is a son of God rather than a mortal son, because it is metaphysically true that man was created in the image of God. It is therefore an error to believe that he is a perishable creature. Even through belief alone, one can gradually develop his intuitive knowing and eventually realize his true soul nature as a son of God. As a result, a rebellious child must begin by believing this truth, because belief is the necessary condition for testing and knowing a truth. When in trouble, one automatically prays to an unknown God, expecting relief. If he is free of trouble, he believes God has heard and answered his prayers. But if his prayer request is not granted, he becomes confused and loses faith in God. Ordinary prayer contains a great deal of beggary and ignorance. People pray haphazardly. Few people know how to pray and how to reach God with their prayers, nor do they know whether their prayers are heard or not, or whether events are unaffected by prayers. They also do not distinguish between things they need and want. Sometimes it is a good thing that we do not get what we want. God, while all-powerful, does not act unlawfully or arbitrarily simply because one prays. He has given man independence, which he can use however he sees fit. To forgive human shortcomings so that man can continue his misbehavior without consequences would imply that God contradicts Himself, disregards the law of cause and effect as applied to the law of action, and manages human lives according to His whim rather than the laws He created. The Lord embodies both law and love. The devotee who seeks God's unconditional love with pure devotion and faith, as well as aligns his actions with divine law, will undoubtedly receive God's purifying, mitigating touch. Any sin and its consequences can be forgiven to a repentant devotee who loves God deeply and thus aligns his life with the all-compassionate Lord. The best way is neither to beg for favors or amnesty from bad outcomes, nor to be resigned and sit idle, allowing the law of action to take its course. And we must demand lovingly as God's sons, not beggars. Every begging prayer, no matter how heartfelt, restricts the soul. As God's sons, we must believe we have everything the Father has. This is our birthright. Jesus realized the truth. I and my Father are one. That is why he wielded power over everything, just as his Father did. Most of us beg and pray without first understanding our divine birthright. That is why we are constrained by the law of beggary. We do not need to beg, but rather reclaim and demand from our Father what we, through our human imagination, thought was lost. At this point, it is necessary to dispel the long-held myth that we are frail human beings. Every day we must think, meditate, affirm, believe, and realize that we are God's sons, and then act accordingly. This realization may take some time, but we must start with the right method rather than relying on the unscientific beggary of prayers and being subject to disbelief, doubts, or the juggling of superstition. Only when the slumbering ego sees itself not as a body, but as a free soul or son of God residing in and working through the body, can it legitimately and legally demand its divine rights. These sacred demands reveal a few of the soul's attitudes that God has successfully responded to. However, it is not enough merely to demand in another's language. When meeting a loved one should not rely on a love book, but rather on the spontaneous language of the heart. If one uses another's language of love and demands addressed to God, he must make the words his own by thoroughly understanding and dwelling on their meaning and applying the utmost concentration and love to them, just as it is not wrong for a lover to address his beloved in the language of a great poet and enliven those words with his own love and feeling. Blind repetition of demands or affirmations without concomitant devotion or spontaneous love reduces one to a praying Victrola that has no idea what its prayers mean. Grinding out prayers vocally and mechanically while inwardly thinking about something else does not result in a response from God. Blind repetition using God's name in vain is ineffective. Repeating a demand or prayer repeatedly, mentally, or orally with increasing attention and devotion spiritualizes the prayer and transforms it from conscious, believing repetition to superconscious experience. A mockery of prayer cannot deceive the divine being because he is the fountain of thoughts. He cannot be bribed at any time, but sincerity, persistence, concentration, devotion, determination, and faith are all effective motivators for him. Furthermore, repeating a long intellectual prayer with the mind absent develops hypocrisy, and to pray or demand without understanding develops ignorance, fanaticism, and superstition. Repeating a demand with increasing concentration and faith is not a mechanical repetition, but rather a changing, progressing power and mental preparation that gradually leads to God. The most important demand is that you re-establish your unity with the Divine Father as a Son of God. Recognize this truth and you will have received everything. Never be discouraged if results do not appear immediately. Stand firm in your demands and you will reclaim your lost divine heritage, and only then will you feel great satisfaction in your heart. Demand to establish your divine rights. Demand what is rightfully yours, and you will receive it. Once you know intuitively that you are a son of God, you will have dominion over everything through consistent mental discipline and devotional meditation. If your demand goes unfulfilled or unanswered, you can only blame yourself and your previous actions. Do not become discouraged. Do not claim that you have resigned yourself to fate or to the preordained commands of a capricious God. Rather, try with increased effort after each failure to obtain what you do not have, what you did not receive because of your own fault, but what is already yours in spirit. Demand with sacred devotion the recognition of your divine birthright as God's Son. Some practical hints. Choose a demand from the contents based on your requirements. Sit motionless in a straight chair, spine erect, and relax your mind. Resurrect the inner substance of words from the tomb of hollow, intellectual concepts, as directed by Christ through your deep intuitional perception. To fully benefit from the God warmth contained in these prayer demands, take only a paragraph at a time from each demand, mentally picture the meaning, visualize the imagery of the figure of speech, and meditate deeply on it until the fiery essence emerges, free of word limitations. One may want to read a complete prayer demand to get a quick overview of its entire meaning, but if he then rereads it over and over again, many times, and then with closed eyes repeatedly, tries to feel the deep inspiration behind and within it, he will spiritualize that prayer, that is, awaken the inspiration slumbering beneath the thick silken quilt of words. With your eyes closed and raised to a point of spiritual concentration between your brows, reflect on the meaning of the demand you've chosen until it becomes a part of you. While meditating on the demand, fill it with devotion. As your meditation progresses, increase your devotion and visualize the demand as your own heart's outburst. Imbue yourself with faith that God understands your heart's desire as expressed through this specific demand. Feel as though God is listening to your soul's silent words just behind the screen of your devotional demand. Feel it. Be one with your heart's desire and be completely convinced that He has heard you. Then go about your duties, hoping not to know whether God will grant your request. Believe without a doubt that your request has been heard and that you will understand that what is God's is also yours. Continue to meditate on God, and when you feel Him, you will receive your rightful inheritance as His divine Son. Daily blossoms emerge from the ever-growing plant of prayer demands. The Universal Father gave me these demands. They're not mine. I only felt them and expressed them through the medium of words so that I could share with you. My blessing goes with them, and I pray that they will strike an answering note on the living harp strings of your heart, allowing you to feel them as I have. Prayer requests are like evergreen plants that constantly produce new blossoms. If a prayer plant is regularly watered with meditation, it will produce fresh roses of God-feeling and inspiration every day. The prayer plant must also be protected from the ravages of doubt, distraction, mental idleness, putting meditation off until tomorrow, which never comes, absent-mindedness, and thinking of something else while pretending that the mind is entirely focused on the force of prayer. Such parasites on prayer plants should be eliminated through faith, devotion to God, self-control, determination, and adherence to a teaching. Roses of eternal inspiration can then be collected daily from the plants of these prayer requests. Be still, seeker of soul awakening, and allow God to answer you through your intuitive soul. Learn to know Him by discovering your true self. Excerpts from the book Journey to Self-Realization by Paramahansa Yogananda.